Hi everyone, my name is Sara Winick, and today I'm joined by Saida Agostini for this edition of Brown Bag Lit's interview series, Lattes Lit. In today's interview, I'm going to be talking with Saida, a queer Afro-Guyanese poet and author of books and collections such as Let the Dead In and Stunt. To get more interviews and content like Lattes Lit, make sure to subscribe to our channel by hitting the subscribe button below and click the link in our bio to get more events and information from Brown Bag Lit. Saida, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for joining us. Just to get started, one of the first things I wanted to ask, I was reading a little bit on your website how for your first collection of poems, Let the Dead In, you traveled back to Guyana and spoke with folk tellers, historians, organizers, to talk about the legacy of chattel slavery, rape, genocide, colonization, resistance, everything like that. And I wanted to ask, when you're writing about your own like history and lineage like this, does it make it like easier to write? Is it harder? Is there a catharsis to kind of unpacking things like that? And what that process looked like for you?
Sure, that's a really great question. I think it's a mixed bag, right? Like one, I'd written a grant to go back to Guyana for my first book, but I honestly didn't think I would get it. So I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Go back to my family's home, like, research, hear stories. That sounds really cute. And then when I found out I got this $10,000 check to do it, I was like, oh, wait, I'm actually going back to like really like not just confront, but really be in conversation with my own family history and like what it has meant to me. So it was really, really hard. I think if I had known, I don't know if I would have necessarily done it, to be honest, but I'm incredibly grateful that things happened the way that they did. Right. And, I think in terms of like the process of writing it, I actually got a residency at Blue Mountain Center when I came home to actually write the poems. Because when I was there, I was interviewing people, talking to people, and it was really interesting. So, like, basically, what I would do, I would wake up every morning, I would write a poem. I would cry, like just like be really kind of heartbroken. And then I would go for a swim. And it felt like it was a really necessary process to like do this work of storytelling in a way that was like at its heart loving, right? And when I say loving, I think loving is actually an act of truth telling. So for me, I think this whole process was really about learning how to love myself and love my people better. So I would vote for catharsis.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I haven't had like obviously like the same experiences at all, but like in my own like writing experience, it definitely is like kind of a mixed bag. Like you said, like you write the poem, you cry, and then you kind of go for a swim, and that's kind of its own way of like healing. So thank you so much for that. I also wanted to talk about throughout the course of your career, you've written a poetry collection like Let the Dead In, and you've also had chapbooks like Stunt. So when you move between forms in your writing, do you find yourself gravitating towards one form? Is there like, has it become easier to write one over the other? You still try to like explore all different kinds of writing?
I think I try to explore in poetry a lot of different forms. Like I will say for me, so, I've been a poet ever since I was like 7 years old, and my grandmother told me I was a genius. So I was like, word, but poetry has always been this thing that has been just for me. I have a full-time job. I do all these things that are around making sure that, I can have a place to live, pay taxes, right?
Mhm.
And poetry is like the space that is just for me. Like it doesn't matter how people see my work. It matters like how I see it and I'm attuned to it. And so that exploration has become more and more important. I think particularly as I moved into middle age, really being able to like do different things and try it out. I mean, honestly, even the chapbook stunt that I wrote, which is about Nellie Jackson, a Black woman entrepreneur and brothel owner in Natchez, Mississippi, I wrote it because COVID just hit, and it was either that or like I needed to watch like Bob's Burgers like 20 times over, and I just couldn't do that anymore. So, I go kind of where my heart tells me to go.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned you started writing when you were 7. Do you remember what you wrote at that your grandma called you like a genius?
Oh my God. It was about like friends being like flowers. And I
There you go.
remember that. And I think I said one kind of friend was a tulip.
See, that's so sweet though. It's like, see, friendship, love all comes together at the beginning and the end. I was looking on your website. I really love the illustrations that are featured throughout. I was wondering, how does visual art connect to your writing? Is it like one before the other? Is it something that's usually interconnected? And just speaking to the connection there, basically.
Sure. So those illustrations were not mine. So yeah, I don't remember their name, but they're amazing. And I feel like there's always a really strong relationship, I think, between all the different kinds of art that there are. I think for me, there have definitely been times, like a number of times, where I've seen a visual and it's like struck me to my core. And I'm like, I want to be able to write about that. I have a poem in my book called Nude Study of a Black Woman. And that was prompted by this like nude picture of a Black woman in the mid 1800s, right? And so I think being able to kind of be open to, what other types of mediums are trying to tell you feels really important to me.
Yeah, I actually, that kind of speaks a little bit to what I was going to talk about next. Not necessarily with visual art, but you've obviously written your own poems and you've performed some of them as well. Are there particular poems or like one poem in particular that you feel is like meant to be seen rather than or read, heard rather than seen, or seen rather than heard? Anything like that?
Yeah, so I think there's a few. So I have a poem called Ode to the Third Limb, which is a praise poem to a dildo. And I feel like there's a big difference between when you read it versus when you like hear it, right? Because I do actually think it's partly a collective experience. Like it's something to like be able to hear it in person and hear all the voices and the singing. Um, yeah, and then, so I have another poem called Harriet Tubman is a Lesbian. And every time I read it, I feel like it evokes a different response from the audience. And so I think I really love audience interaction and engagement with my piece. Like, I think back to like kind of all of these histories that we have where poetry isn't just static. Like it's not something that's just meant to be read on the page. It was something that in a lot of different cultures, including ours, was like, performed and read. I think about like the history of like slam poetry,
Yeah.
right? And like the beautiful oral traditions of like just standing up and reading it. Now, I can't memorize my work, so I will say that's like a thing, but I love to be able to share verbally in that way. I'm actually working for my chapbook. I'm shifting it into a choreo poem right now.
Mhm.
And it's been really exciting to kind of think about how the audience will engage with that work.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love watching like spoken word on like YouTube and stuff, but it's like, it's so hard to do in real life. And I don't know if people realize how difficult it can be, especially like even without memorizing it, like just getting up there, it can be kind of intimidating. So I commend anybody who can do spoken word. And then I also wanted to ask, I know you kind of,
Hmm.
oh yeah,
For sure.
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Um, I also wanted to ask, you kind of started to talk about it. Are there any,
No, sorry. I think something's up with the internet. Yeah.
yes, potentially. Can you hear me? Okay. So I also wanted to ask, are there any projects that you have in the works right now? And can you tell us a little bit about what those projects are? Or alternatively, if you don't, do you have an idea of where you want your writing to go next?
Sure. So there's a few different projects that are coming up for me right now. So one, I'm working on my second full-length collection. I turned 40 2 years ago, and as one does, I'm writing a series of sermons, praise poems, and prayers, just about like kind of like all of like my experiences, things that have been happening in the last few years. As we all know, it's been an Octavia Butler apocalypse. So it's been a way to kind of process and think about it and make meaning for myself. As part of it, there's going to be a long form poem about Harriet Tubman and the first journey that she took to freedom
Mhm,
when she left Maryland, went to Philadelphia, and then in Philadelphia made the decision to turn back and get her family, right?
mhm,
I'm so in awe. Like, I don't even think fascination is the right word. I'm in awe. I'm in, like, often thunderstruck by that story, and really wish like we talked more about that, like what it takes to like be able to have something that you and everyone around you has been fighting for so long, and then be like, it's not enough just for me to have it. It's actually means nothing if I don't have my people here with me, right? I think there's a lot that we can learn from that. I know there's a lot for me. I think particularly in this moment where we're seeing so many genocides happen around the world, it's a question that I've been asking myself a lot. So that's a big project. The other major project I'm working on, as I mentioned, is I am creating a choreo poem for my chapbook STUNT about Nellie Jackson. I'm just fascinated by this woman who's been like such a badass, right? Like, I mean, to own a brothel in the heart of Jim Crow,
Yeah.
Mississippi for 60 years, and just also like be a spy against the KKK and like give money to the civil rights movement, and wear fur coats while doing it. You know, like I think everybody should be talking about her. And so I'm really excited about these projects.
Yeah, and it's I mean it's a great thing that that poetry is able to do because it's like you said, like we should be talking about these things more, and a history curriculum doesn't always, it doesn't always cover those kinds of things, but poetry allows you to kind of take that history and make your own with it. So it's really interesting always to talk to poets who get the take so much inspiration from history and kind of turn it around and make it into art.
It's
Um,
fun. Like there's just so many random things about history that you never know. So yeah, I love this work. But sorry, go ahead.
No, no, you're so good. I also wanted to ask, throughout the course of your career, is there an invaluable piece of advice or a lesson that you've gotten about writing, publishing, the writing process, anything like that? I know it's a bit of a big question.
I mean, so I was in oh gosh, where was I? I think I was in Alabama. I was in Montgomery, Alabama, and I am a Cave Canem fellow, and I was there with another CC fellow, Jacqueline Trimble, who lives there. And she said to me, she's a brilliant poet, by the way. If you haven't read her books, you should. And, you know, we were going out for lunch somewhere, and she was like, so Saida, tell me about like your first book. Like, are you trying to get it published? And I was like, well, I'm just really worried it's not good enough. Right. And I remember she stopped the car, she looked at me, and she was like, Saida, there's a lot of bad books out there. It's okay if yours is one of them. And I was like, yes, like this is so freeing, because I think particularly being like a Black woman, like I cannot tell you how many times like I felt this pressure, like I have to be so good, I have to be the best. And I'm like, it's not so much about whether or not like other people are going to see this work as good, or if it's even going to meet my own internal, like
Mhm.
incredibly wild critic. It's about like, do I trust what I'm putting out there? Is it true? Does it speak the way that I want it to speak? And that's like what matters the most.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good piece of advice. I feel like I've done a couple of these interviews now. I don't think I've ever heard advice quite like that, but it is so true. Like you said, it's about, is it true? Does it matter? Um,
I think this though is helpful. I mean, I would love to win a Pulitzer Prize. Don't get me wrong,
yeah,
but that's at the end of the day, um, I heard Angela Jackson speak a while ago, and she said the joy is in the work,
yeah.
and I think that's what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, writing itself, it's like it's cathartic, it's you're putting yourself on the page.
Mhm.
So yeah, so thank you again so much again today for joining me and answering these questions. It's been really great to talk to you. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you want to add or talk about that I didn't touch on? It's totally fine if not. But anything you want to say that I didn't get the chance to?
No, I just really appreciate this opportunity. It's been great.
Yeah, of course. It's been amazing to talk to you. So, Sayeda, thank you so much again for joining us today. For more content like this below, check out the links in the description to brownbaglit.com and our social media handles as well. And see you next time on the next edition of Lattes and Lit.